Hey there, Archons. Zach here ahead of the episode with a special note. The next 3 episodes you're going to see in the feed are my audio logs from Keyforge Celebration. I'll be doing them for days 1, 2, and 3, doing interviews, recaps of games, my thoughts as we go along from each day of Keyforge Celebration. Now, we here at Call of Discovery usually do more evergreen content, but as you can tell from the past handful of episodes, we've been following the Keyforge news a bit more closely just because it's such a special time in Keyforge's life before the start of 2023 and after the Ghost Galaxy acquisition and GameFound campaign. So I'm going to cover these. Hopefully these will be little time capsules into what it was like to go to the first official Keyforge event in person in 3 years. It's been a long time coming. I'm already a bit emotional, to be honest, and I hope this either serves as a lovely recap of the event if you were able to go, or even more if you weren't able to go for any number of reasons, that you listen to these as they come out or you go back and listen to them, and hopefully it feels like I took you along with me, dear listener. Now, with all that said, the episode.
Hello and welcome to Call of Discovery, the podcast where we invite you on a journey into the Crucible for a celebration of all things Keyforge, its wonderful community, and of course, the excitement of Discovery. I am your co-host, Ed, and I am here with, it's the one and only Armstrong, it's Zach Armstrong. How you doing, mate?
Ed, so it's a new set, and so I've been renamed. I'm not even Sweaty Zach. I'm Crystallized Zach. I touched some dark amber. I've got the blue crystals poking out of me at very inconvenient angles, I've got to say. And I've got the mutant trait now. I don't even have the human trait anymore, which is freaky. So I really have a lot to process. Crystal Surge puts amber onto me, which it didn't before. I'm really worried about what this means.
Oh no! What's the prognosis?
I don't know. I went to my doctor, Doc Bookton, but they just laughed evilly and played cards off the top of their deck until I left. So,
to be fair,
disturbing.
That sounds like a bad experience. You should probably refer that to someone.
There was a Skixuno on there, so it wasn't good for anybody.
Yeah, it's really not good. It's really not good. Well, I
trigger Dark Amber Vault now, though, which is exciting.
It sounds like, Zach, you've had a mutation of some sort.
It's been a massive mutation, but only one. It's not mutations. It's been one mass mutation.
Mass mutation, not mass mutations.
You and Blake are in good company there.
Yeah. Blake, who I met the other day, Zach.
That's right. Blake has met both of us in person, just like we've met in person, me and Ed, dear listener. Audio podcast
true.
wink.
That's still not true.
Wink.
I love an auditory wink. So we are getting back to one of our traditional podcast formats today,
right.
Aren't we, Zach?
That's right. A series that's continuing.
I love a good series.
Me
I
too.
love a good series. No, dear listener, we are going to get back to more regular content or more standard content in the new year. But there's so much excitement this year. We've got to keep giving you all of the excitement as we hear it and as we see it. But this episode, we are looking back on potentially one of our most loved sets, potentially one of our most hated sets. We'll find out. I think it's probably more the former than the latter. But
Sure.
We're going to talk about it in a lot of depth. We're going to cover off essentially a look back on that set and its impact on the community, what was going on at the time, what happened through the life cycle of that set. We're going to take a look at some of the mechanics, take a look at how the set operates in the wider ecosystem of Keyforge, the wider universe of decks from different sets. We're then going to have a look at some of the different cards in the set and grant them the fabled Call of Discovery awards. Exactly. And then we're going to take a look at how the set might change in the future, how the set might relate to future sets and possibly even future formats that we play in.
Yes, that's right. Mass Mutation. Yes, it's a great set. I've met very few detractors of it. We can talk about the sealed experience a little bit and some other worries, but overall, I think this set was a big success for a lot of reasons and made Keyforge even Keyforgier.
Exactly. I love a bit of Keyforge when it's Keyforge. But this set came at a bit of a sad time, didn't it? It was released
It did.
on July the 10th, 2020. And I can't think, was there something big that happened in 2020? Because
Yes, I became a Call of Discovery host in January, so that was pretty
did you
big.
actually? Was
Nothing,
it
nothing could have,
2020?
nothing could have topped that. Nothing could have drowned out that noise. But yeah, that it released. It was supposed to have a slightly earlier release, but it was released during the early days of the pandemic, which still has its ripple effects. Many people are in some places and ways, back to meeting in bigger events with relative safety, but that's not quite true everywhere. But yeah, it was the first set to drop during the pandemic, which I mean, just the one of the just one of my biggest feelings about that was the set was overall so successful and so loved that, man, I really think it was just so sad to know that was this set was gutted of its chance to really be in people's hands, in people playing in person, getting sealed vault tours, all that sort of thing. There was so much excitement to be had around the set that we could have had, but still a well loved set. But yeah, so much missed for it there. So much missed for it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, putting things together for today's conversation, I was really struck by the fact that I haven't really played this set as much as I would like to, and that's because I'm an in-person gamer. I like the social side of things, and there wasn't really much in-person stuff going on. So I've played a lot of Mass Mutation with my partner, but aside from that, yeah, I haven't really got much game time for the set, which is a real shame
Yeah.
because it is such an incredible set, and we're going to get into that
Yeah.
shortly.
After it came out, I was blessed to have another just health conscious friend who had a back porch. We tested and as much as we could like before we met, and this was in the earlier days, right? And we actually played on his back porch, sitting a full 10 feet apart, and we would scoot up. 10 to 15 feet apart, and we would scoot up to the playing, our game spot, the table in the middle for our turn. Then when your turn was over, you would walk back. And we played through a display that way over several visits. So shout out to K March. Many of you may have played him on the Crucible or in some leagues, but we had quite a time testing out Mass Mutation decks that way.
Oh, I'm so glad that you got the chance to do that. I think
Yeah.
because it's it needs to be played in person, right? Particularly this set because of the interactions with some of the enhancements that we'll go on to and talk about in a second. But yeah, just as an overall, we had no new houses introduced in this set, but 3 new, I guess, mechanics or things that matter in the set.
Themes.
That were
Yeah.
themes, yeah, exactly, which we're going to be talking about in a second. But talking of themes, I think the flavor in this set was really, really fun. We had so many characters that we knew and loved from the first 2 sets in particular coming back and doing interesting things, often sort of as different versions of themselves. Thinking here about Niffle Kong, Rad Penny,
Citizen Shricks.
exactly. Subject Kirby. Was it Subject?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Subject Kirby, that's right. I think that theme, the theme of the mutation of the Dark Amber was really on point because you have the chase rare Dark Amber Vault that can appear in any house. That is obviously very strong artifact, can appear in any house. It's card number 0 or 1, I think 1 in the set. That gives all friendly mutants +2 power, and then it says after you play a mutant, draw a card. So, and this ends up being a very strong effect, and it can technically appear in multiples, though it's not, doesn't do that much. And just the theming on mutant effects and the design of the action cards and artifacts and creatures that interacted with mutants, and all of the different ways the mechanics interacted with that trait was really well done, really well done. And of course, you can't talk about Mass Mutation without talking about the introduction of enhancements, where now, dear listener, if you're a Keyforge, through 2022 die hard listening to this, you already know all about enhancements, and I'm thinking they're sticking around. So future people, you probably know what they are too, right? But it's, enhance with then 2 pips of some kind, draw, damage, capture, or amber, that during the deck generation process are randomly put on another card. And the amount of discovery you can have in a Mass Mutation deck with where your pips land, like a damage pip on a Gateway to Dis to pop wards, or a capture pip on a Spoils of Battle to capture additional amber. Like, my gosh, it's just so fun. I opened a Key Frog with 3 damage pips in a deck with Resurgence. Keyforge, of course, having 2 power, and it says destroyed. You may forge a key at current cost. So, like, I can just forge a key, like, for no extra amber, and then resurge the thing. It's so fun. It's so fun. Yeah. So I think Mass Mutation fired on all cylinders there, and we tossed this out to Twitter and our Patreon people on Discord. Brobnar89 really wanted to really mentioned how did this how did this how was this affected by dropping early in the pandemic, right? And I mean, I think the short answer is just it didn't get its due. It was such a good set. I was listening to TTR, the Tabletop Royale guys, recently, and they talked about this, how Mass Mutation was such a good set in so many ways that Age of Ascension wasn't for the general card playing community who tried it out. That, man, if that crowd who had kind of soured on Keyforge during Age of Ascension had gotten their hands on Mass Mutation, like, I have great hope for the game's future now with Ghost Galaxy. But man, that trajectory would have been set so high if those people could have played Mass Mutation in person, I think.
So yeah, and if we look at the wider backdrop, Keyforge had so much momentum coming into this set. It had possibly, the optimum type of event series that any sort of game like Keyforge could have, with a global vault tour. It was getting a lot of interest. It was just settling down, and all of a sudden this world altering event happens, and means that you can't do the one thing you actually want to do to play Keyforge, and that is come together
Yeah.
with other people.
Yeah.
The game didn't have quite so much of the how to put it, asset a draw that maybe a Magic the Gathering or a Flesh and Blood had. And as a result, I think it was always going to be slightly difficult. But oh my goodness, Zach, I would have bought so many Mass Mutation decks if I'd been in person, because of
Yeah.
just what you said, that sense of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
The call of discovery would have been too strong not to. But no, we got, on the flip side, it was a relatively underprinted set, I think, because of everything that was going on, because they probably had time to limit the print run, with knowledge that the pandemic was a thing. And yeah, that's certainly led to crazy high prices for Mass Mutation here in UK and Europe. I don't know what it's
Yeah.
like in the US.
Yeah. They've stayed reasonable, but of course we've heard stories of several places in Europe just running out of Mass Mutation, because I think the last part of Brobnar89's question was, how did that affect ways of playing the game? I think what happened is everybody who was just really enraptured by this game, who especially had momentum coming out of that Vault Tour season into the pandemic, saw just how much promise and how much awesomeness to be to be blunt. This set had. So people were buying it up. People, the Keyforge, different Keyforge teams that have come and gone since then. People were buying up decks, looking for the best ones, trying to find the best archetypes inside of this set. I would recommend jumping over to. There's a couple different podcasts like the Nordic Keyforge podcast. There is one Nordic Keyforge podcast episode where they talk about their signature format, Nordic Hexad, and they talk about the kind of really top tier deck that comes out of Mass Mutation that they're calling Crush, which is no matter how many times you board wipe it, they're always going to be just dumping really great creatures onto the board, constantly archiving, generating amber speed all the time. And there's just all sorts of fun cross house synergies in this set, all sorts of fun artifacts and creatures that I think people were able to play it online. Shout out to TCO keeping it alive there, and with being able to assign the enhancements. So TCO helped keep it alive, and I think this is really a deeply meaningful set for the people who played Keyforge through the pandemic, because it was an amazing thing, and it came to us in July of 2020, and it had to carry us through about a year of no new sets, and not a whole lot of news from Fantasy Flight.
Yeah, and I think it probably was the perfect set to do that, right? Because it had that staying power. You could legit open hundreds of decks of this set, and they'd all do slightly different things.
Yeah.
And you're still going to get that discovery because of those enhancements.
Yes. And I will say, with enhancements, it went from the unique deck game to Ghost Galaxy is now calling it, the unique card game. But I literally, as far as decks that are registered, have a unique card in Keyforge because I have a Maverick with a enhancement, and I checked via Decks of Keyforge all the other registered decks, and nobody else has registered a Sanctum Subtle Auto with an Amber Pip on it. All the other decks with Sanctum Subtle Autos, none of them are either enhanced or there's no Amber enhancement pips in the deck. So like I've got literally this one card that there might be nobody else in the world who has that exact card in my deck that's already unique. So yeah, it just turned that kind of that special part of Keyforge up to 11 for me.
And if we're skipping towards enhancements here, let's talk about some of those unintended consequences of enhancements. Things like the fact that it's harder to evaluate the value of the deck, the power of the deck on decks of Keyforge because of the random nature of those enhancements. Because for most people, they're not going to go through all their decks and update where are the enhancements on decks of Keyforge, and that's because it's not included in the algorithm. So when it comes on to when a deck gets registered, the registration doesn't know where the amber is. It doesn't know where the enhancements lie, and that makes it exciting. But also, I think probably presented some challenges for TCO, and makes it difficult for probably Ghost Galaxy moving forward to use this.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate side effect, and there is the very corner case that if there's cash tournaments or something, or the game gets a lot more popular, there's the possibility that people could get cards printed with an ideal pip placement. Now there's some mathematical limitations if how many cards are enhanced. That's been a concern that people have noted without having that data. Fortunately, I don't think that's anything we're going to have to deal with anytime soon at all. But Ghost Galaxy has stated they, as they are generating new decks with enhancements for their sets going forward, that data will be saved. I assume it will be visible in the whatever their version of the Master Vault becomes, at least at time of recording. That's not launched. So yeah, there were some complications there. Shout out to the coders, though, who when there's a deck where it only has one possible place for all the enhancements to go, like there's 4 draw pip enhancements and 4 enhanced cards, then like on DOK and TCO and some of Sky Jedi's work, they just pop the enhancement right on there on the deck list, which is
And
really
Zach,
nice.
what's your feeling on the power level of enhancements overall? Were they truly OP or were they about right?
Uh, about right, leaning towards a little bit powerful. You have your cards like Gloria's Attendant, that is simply a 1 power creature that enhances with 2 Amber Pips. Now, I think that's pretty well balanced. You're generally not going to be terribly excited about a 1 power creature, although it is a mutant, so you might have some synergies. And that's really kind of the baseline. Then you have stuff that's a bit worse, like a Goodness Mutant Cut Purse, that is simply a 3 power vanilla creature and Shadows with 3 damage pips. But then you have the stuff that's really interesting and really powerful, and some of it, of course, the greatest offender and perhaps being too powerful, is Cronus, the 3 power Logos creature that enhances with 2 draw pips. That says after you resolve a draw pip bonus icon, you may archive a card. Now that ends up being really powerful in some faster decks. I think it's the only one I'm aware of that people are really worried about the power level of. You certainly have, I'm seeing in our notes here, Amphora Captura,
Yeah.
which has a very high win rate calculated on decks of Keyforge. Things like Maleficorn has a lot of value with damage pips. So I think there are some offenders in power creep as far as things that benefit from enhancements being played. However, I think most of them are generally as unfair as some other high end stuff has been in other sets. Just maybe a bit more common with Cronus being an uncommon card. So something to watch out for. And we'll see what answers come in future sets, right, towards draw pips and archiving.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for Captura, by the way, is the card with the highest win rate in the set.
That's
It's
right.
above even Dark Amber Vault, which is it's one of those cards that just sits in your deck and it doesn't look threatening, but it's a real support, isn't it? It bolsters everything else.
That's
I
right.
just
And
want to say,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
And I'll say Amphora Captura because it is a 1 set rare. So if you're not familiar, you likely are, but if you're not familiar, it's a rare artifact in Saurian. It's an item. It has enhance 2 Amber Pips, 2 damage pips, 2 draw pips, which is already bonkers. And it has the passive text: when resolving a bonus icon, you may choose to resolve it as a capture bonus icon instead, which is pretty bonkers. You have a lot of effects that just turns anything into Amber control. You can combo that with Scrivener Fabian, who turns a capture pip into a steal. Lots of different combos that can happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Zach, I get your point about card draw and Kronos, but I still think about card draw quite differently in Keyforge. And I'd much rather, unless it's on a Logos or surrounded by Logos with lots of archiving potential, I'd much rather have a capture or an amber or even some spot damage because frankly, in Keyforge, isn't it more like 1/3 of a card you draw? Because
Yes.
you might not be able, 2/3 of a chance are you'd actually just draw it at the end of your turn anyway, and you wouldn't be able to play it. So unless you've got house cheating, unless you've got a good amount of archiving available to you on the turn that you get to use that, it's not really going to add that much value.
Yeah, in a standard Cronus deck that's just run of the mill, that's going to be the situation where you're only going to have a handful of draw pips, maybe 2, maybe 4. Once you start getting up to like 6, 7, 8, and depending on placement, that's where it starts to really. This is kind of a higher end Archon solo concern with Cronus. I think in just any regular old deck, if you're playing sealed and you get 1 Cronus and no other draw pips, it's going to be a good card. But it's not gonna overpower your opponent on its own. In a sealed environment, I think generally that Amber is going to do a bit more work.
Cool. So coming back a bit to a higher level, and we're looking back at previous Keyforge sets here, and people have just come away from Worlds Collide, which arguably had some variance in power level between houses, with Grognar
Famously, I'd
being
say.
the almighty strong house, obviously. And so Zach, firstly, do you think that Mass Mutation did a better job of getting more balance between power variants and houses? And secondly, do you think that there was a better job done of power variants between decks?
Uh, the short answer is yes. I think the houses were relatively balanced. Logos was still kind of just the favorite child, of course, with a number of blazingly fast things. Dis remained good at some steel and destroyed effects, and essence scale being an absolutely top tier card. But all the other houses can really pull their weight. You do have setups in most other houses in Mass Mutation that are pretty good. And this is, speaking generally, if you're going to take something to a weekly night, or you're opening it in sealed, all the houses have some setups that are just going to really just go. Shadows was a bit weaker this time. They like to keep tacking on requirements you need to meet before you can steal, with the exception of like bone knithing. It had a requirement. It was just a great one. So I think they did great spreading out the power amongst the different houses. You still have the houses doing a lot of the things you're used to with some new mutant stuff. And no house feels totally left behind like Brobnar did, like Brobnar felt in Worlds Collide. Everybody really had something. There are good setups. There are good lineups in each house. In this set. And I think as far as competition goes, like there's plenty of Mass Mutation decks that are just clunky. And I guess this is a place to mention the sealed experience. A lot of people had the experience where if you don't have creature control in your Mass Mutation sealed deck, you're going to have a bad time, because there's a lot of creatures, there's a lot of effects on creatures, lots of decision points, lots of play effects, lots of destroyed effects, lots of very effective creatures. And so if you can't keep up on controlling the board, and usually just being able to fight stuff is not enough, you have to be cycling. You have to be efficient with your action card removal. You're not going to have a great time. There are often feelings of a lack of agency. There's that feeling that, card game designers have talked about, where you want to generate the feeling that, you aren't without options, that you always have options to play, that you have a chance at a game. And sometimes in Mass Mutation Seal that just didn't work. You can go back to TTR's Tournament of Champions and just watch Nathan Starwalt's face in the early rounds of that, as he just gets super super angry at the deck he's playing, because he doesn't feel like he can really pull out a W there. I will say, just as another experiential note, our little scene here in my town has mostly just played Mass Mutation Sealed. And I don't know if it's just we have a bunch of nerds who love decision points, or have just gotten a bit luckier with our Mass Mutation pulls, but our scene loves Mass Mutation Sealed. We're working through a pile of it at our friendly local game store, and people love opening Mass Mutation decks for Sealed. Not that we have much option right now, but so some ups and downs with Sealed, but I think the power level disparity isn't so bad that you're going to roll your eyes because somebody opens something that will only stomp you. If you have some of the common and uncommon creature removal tools, you're going to have a chance in Mass Mutation Sealed. So,
Zach, great point about, I think, the things you need in each set to be competitive and to have a fun play experience are different. And completely agree with you on the creature control thing on this one. However, the stats also agree with you that there is very little variance between houses in this set from decks of Keyforge. They put Sanctum and Star Alliance very slightly behind, whilst Dis and Logos are very slightly ahead. But, frankly, you might have a deck with a really strong Logos, Star Alliance, Sanctum, for instance, and you might have a really, really
sure.
bad Dis, Logos, and Untamed deck. So I don't think it's because of enhancements spreading the love so much as they do. I would question the ability of stats to properly capture the complexity of this set.
I think each house's kind of standard deviation is pretty tiny. I've played some in a net deck tournament, essentially played some really high end Star Alliance, and there are some decks that really love using Font of the Eye from Sanctum, the artifact that says Omni if an enemy creature was destroyed this turn, capture an amber, which especially in multiples is just so good. So yeah, I think each house has a top tier, some top tier cards and some top tier setups as far as pure strength goes. And it's pretty easy not to feel left in the dark if you get to pick from a few sealed decks. You just need that creature control. The nights that I sweep with Mass Mutation, it's when I have creature control in every house at locals.
And how
Yeah.
about power creep? Because going out and getting questions from listeners, both Sky Jedi and Karen Brown mentioned
Mm.
power creep, and Karen said, is there power creep? And if so, how can the game find answers without further power creep?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'm not ready to call this set power creep until I see the power level of other sets as far as what you might pull in sealed, what you're going to be looking for an Archon solo deck, or excuse me, the tentative title, just Archon deck, Archon standard. So I think there is some, I think there is a bit power creep. I don't think it was purely intentional. I think just with how decks were generated, what was at common, what enhancements were on what rarities, that sort of thing. I think that some of the top end decks ended up being pretty strong. I think though, power creep will only be power creep if this set, at least in an Archon standard setting, an Archon setting, if these top decks can continue to regularly beat other top decks from future sets, then I would kind of, looking back, call it power creep. So we'll see. We'll see. There might be decks that can keep up with this kind of throw tons of creatures onto the board stuff. There might be decks that people have yet to pull out and practice with and discover just because they don't look great in other matchups right now, so people haven't really picked those out. And there might be stuff in future sets, either Winds of Exchange or Grim Reminders that really push against this. So it's kind of a lame answer, but just given the nature of Keyforge and matchups, I'd say I'm going to have to wait and see if it's power creep.
Yeah, no,
Right?
and
Yeah.
once again, the stats, albeit are they accurate in this set? We got to question that. Their accuracy in sets 1 to 3, without all of the amber and capture and all of these lovely things on different cards. I think it was easier, but now it's a bit harder. But that shows this set as being the most powerful on average of all of them. But it's not by a large margin. And
Yeah.
interestingly, Kota is second.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why my favorite thing about Keyforge, one of them. I can't say my one favorite thing. I just have so many favorite things about Keyforge. is matchups, which is why I think Mass Mutation decks. I think if you held if you paid for everybody's airfare and said, okay, everybody bring your top Archon solo decks, we're gonna do best of 3. I think a lot of it would be Mass Mutation from what we've seen in online play. I think actual local metas are going to look a little bit different, and I think as people look to answer the meta, both with future sets and other kinds of decks they have in their collection, I think that may churn a bit. I don't think Mass Mutation is so far ahead that it'll leave everything else in the dust. Mostly because Mass Mutation doesn't have a whole lot of OTK, one turn kill setups that are just going to combo out and forge all 3 keys. What they have is a lot of speed, a lot of good creatures, a lot of amber control. So they're just really good decks, but they're not winning off of a combo, which I think leaves room for other decks to match up against them with. But we'll see. They've been dominating online. We'll see what holds up in real life. Because we've done it before the designers did it before with Worlds Collide and like bringing in key cost increase and steel hate. There are ways that they could really help out against Mass Mutation.
And what you said there about there's no one combo winning games for you, I think was reflected. I was looking through the set trying to find for our award ceremony, Zach, who would be the contenders for most infamous card. And if you look back through the past 3 sets, you've got these really infamous cards that have caused drama, theatre, havoc, chaos. And there weren't really so many in Mass Mutation, which is also kind of reflected in the win percentages of the set and the fact that there didn't need to be any erratas following the release of the set. So always a good sign, always a good sign. Shall we talk about a couple of the mechanics we haven't got round to?
Yeah, for sure.
What was gigantic, Zach? And was it fun?
Gigantic. Oh my gosh. So they spoiled this a while back. And here's the funny thing. Plenty of other card games have done this, right? It's one creature across 2 cards. They came up with a handful of clarifying rules for how to manage that with other card effects that can target a creature. It's one creature across 2 cards. They're usually huge and have some big, fun, sometimes strong effect, and they always come with a card called It's Coming. It's got an Amber Pip, and it says, search for one half of a gigantic creature, put it into your hand, shuffle. Oh my gosh, these are so fun. And I really feel like the consistency that they take up 3 cards in a 36 card deck. You've got 1 searching card that goes to get half of them. I really feel like they hit the right pace with how hard these are to get out and what their power level is. Of course, Niflkong a bit weaker than the others, although I'd make an argument for a couple Niflkong setups that are pretty good. And then Ultra Gravitron, absolutely one of the favorites because you archive cards off the top of your deck, 5, I think, with it. And then you get to discard those to purge just creatures when you want to. And then Deosilus, which captures all your opponent's Ember and can just do tons of splash damage. So I think, oh my gosh, I think they're a ton of fun. Because they're a creature that can always be removed. That's true of any creature, though. So there's always a risk reward with creatures that they might get to reap, but they might be destroyed because your artifacts can't reap, your actions can't reap. So I think they were brilliant and a ton of fun. People have so many stories about their gigantic creatures that they found in decks that they've opened, that they've played with. They're a ton of fun. Sometimes they're in a competitive deck. I think they were absolutely perfectly executed on, in my opinion.
And I think you were having a joke at my expense on Twitter this week around something rather similar to this, Zach. Would you like to enlighten our listeners?
Yes. So the joke was, so Kelly on Twitter, Valacanth Tamer, Kelly was replying to me on Twitter and said, the greatest treasure of all, excuse me. The greatest treasure of all is the combos that didn't fire along the way. And I said, oh yeah, that's Ed's Keyforge mission statement.
It literally is. I get so much joy from playing my own little game. I don't really find this whole winning thing that fun, but if you give me a challenge, like I'm going to get out a Niflkong and I'm going to feel like a god for a whole turn until the opponent destroys it with some sort of well-timed creature control, which is sad, but I'll still feel like I've summoned an Egyptian god, I will have the sense of achievement. Certainly, gigantic creatures are awesome to me. Although I'm sad that there weren't more of them because there were only 3. And
yes,
do they really matter if you can buy 20 decks and not see one? Probably not.
Yeah, I did read about people being disappointed they bought a whole 1 or 2 displays and not getting a single one. So people loved them just for the fun of them, and I think that was great. We had a question come in for this episode from Taleka, who said, I want to know if you'll have any memorable gigantic creature plays or denials and what you think gigantic creatures might look like if they ever come back. I just want to see them. I just want more of those big splashy effects that aren't quite too strong, but make you go, ooh, when you see it. And just deeply themed for whatever house they're in. I would love to see it in Brobnar, of course. Brobnar already has giants, so I can't imagine what's gigantic to a Brobnar giant.
A Khalifa
like
dragon.
What would be so big? What
Um,
what if it was Mega Narp?
Ultra
No other
Narp.
creatures can reap gain 4.
Oh, that's terrifying. But one of them was actually quite good. Ultra Gravitron has a win percentage of 56.8. It's up there with the top cards in the set.
Yeah.
The others not quite so good, but this one it really did stand out. So it suggests that if it's balanced well enough, it can stand out in some decks anyway.
Yeah. I have had the most fun, I'll have to say. Well, okay, 2 quick stories for Ostrom Teleka here. Very quick. I've had a ton of fun with Niflkong. It's probably the gigantic I've had the most fun with at the table, especially when I get it with a bunch of Niffle apes, because you might say, "Oh, you have a whole lot of Niffle apes. That's not so fun." But I've often or several times pulled it with Niffle queens as well, and the Niflkong goes and gets all Niffles. And sometimes that's like between the Niflkong and all your Niffle apes and your queen, that's like 2/3, if not 3/4, like most, maybe 9 or even 10 of your untamed cards. Like if you get Niflkong out, all of a sudden the rest of your deck is mostly just 2 houses. And I've had a lot of fun with that. I've had a lot of fun with that across at least 2 different decks. And I will say one of the best ways to cheese the Key Raken in the Key Raken co-op scenario is everybody bring Deosilus decks. Just everybody bring Deosilus decks and time out your Deosilises, get your Ludo out, then blow up your own Deosilus. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. I would really love to try that at Nightmare mode.
Okay, that sounds
with
awesome.
the new co-op modes. Yeah,
That sounds really cool.
So, yeah, I have had not a ton of competitive success with the Gigantics, but the amount of the amount of fun I've had with the Gigantics is off the charts. Off the charts.
Now, there's another mechanic or theme or, I don't really know what to call it, that we haven't spoken about, and that is the titular mutations. Now, Zach, the fact that we haven't spoken about them yet, is that really kind of symbolic of the fact that they were essentially the Mega Narp of this set? Or did they work? Were they fun? What do you think? Were you happy to see mutants in your deck?
I was happy. I was always looking for that mutant synergy with Kurzap that blows up all non-mutants or Crystal Surge. I love the dynamic of how that plays in intra-set versus out of set, right? So I think that was great. It was great as a theme. I loved the through lines you see in things like Doc booked in to Helper Bot to Bot booked in. Like there's a whole story there, right? Even Senator Shrix and Worlds Collide to Citizen Shrix. What it tells a story there. Senator Shrix spending captured Amber as a politician, and then they lose an election and they're stealing Amber. And the flavor text is like something like after the election, everything changed. It told a lot of really good stories while having a solid kind of thematic mechanical base. So while a lot of those changes in the storylines weren't quite as flashy on the board, I think it was the perfect base for all of this other stuff to be built on. And I had a ton of fun with it. I love, comm officer Kirby to subject Kirby. All of a sudden, he's a test subject. There was a lot of fun mini storylines in there that really just make you feel connected to the world of the Crucible as much of a everything in the kitchen sink setting that it is. Like it worked. It worked.
Yeah, so true, so true. But all of the things you've focused on right now are the flavorful mutant creatures in the set, not necessarily the ones that sat between the different houses. So for any listeners new to this, there was essentially a kind of round of different cards where you had say a Sanctum and a Logos hybrid, a Dis, and a Shadows hybrid. Every house pairing had its own hybrid.
That's right.
And
that's right. Yeah.
if I'm honest, Zach, I absolutely loved the mutations. I loved Rag
Really?
Penny. I loved all of that stuff. But those house pairing mutants really, I just found quite underwhelming.
Sure, I can see that. A number of them, somebody figured out the math right, because basically what happens is you start with a blank 4-power creature, and then depending on what houses you add or subtract power, armor, and abilities. And yeah, there were some real stinkers. Like there were 2 different ones that just ended up as a 3-power creature with elusive and skirmish, which we already had that in Shadows in Worlds Collide, and it just felt boring. It was like, oh, there is a vanilla creature. There is there is a 2/2 for 2 bear in Keyforge, and it's these creatures.
Yeah, I
But
just don't
some of
think
them were good.
Keyforge does vanilla, like, or at least like the vanilla ice cream of Keyforge is the kind of Cornish clotted cream ice cream, which is for any Americans listening to this. I know you're a clotted cream man, Zach, but anyone
I
in the
am.
US who hasn't heard of clotted cream, you need to sort of get the kind of black market smuggling ring for clotted cream out of the southwest of the UK, because frankly, you don't know what you're missing out on. Anyway, with that in mind, I think we've covered off a lot of the main themes of the set. We've covered off a lot of the main mechanics. Shall we go into our very real? I've got some awards in front of me here, Zach. They're real. They exist. It's a compass of discovery, and we're going to reward them to certain cards.
So Ed jokes, but Sky Jedi wanted to make a liar out of us, and so he did. He actually 3D printed the Call of Discovery Compass Award. So Ed, I kid you not, full seriousness, am holding the Golden Compass of Discovery in my hands right now. Like I know you were joking, and I might have told you about this like 2 years ago when Sky sent this to us. But I legit have the award in my hands. I'll have to post a photo.
I don't believe
It's
you.
pretty amazing.
I don't believe you.
I have photos. It's been in the background of the stream when I was streaming the SAS climb. It's 100% real. Hold on, listener. I might literally have to send Ed a text message mid recording here.
Yeah, 2.5 years of building trust, Zach, and you're lying to me now.
No, it's real. Okay, yeah, I'm just gonna like manipulate my phone. Manipulate my phone live on the micro. Oh gosh. Oh, my case doesn't. Okay, hold on. I'm a really old man when it comes to technology. Here we go.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. It has been sent to my co-host, dear listener. He is seeing the evidence that the Golden Compass of Discovery is indeed a real, actual, physical object.
Yeah, but is it? Or are you just really good at Photoshop?
Oh my gosh, Ed. Wow.
I'm calling a deep fake.
If we're if we're gonna question that, I don't know if you're real.
Oh my goodness. Well, when I did meet Blake, he was wondering whether he should be meeting people that he's met on the internet. But I do exist. I am real.
You're just the UK's premier AI experiment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, which unfortunately was no. I'm not. No, sorry. I was going to make an EU funding joke.
That's where it all went.
But that's a different podcast.
Anyways, Call of Discovery Awards. Ed, I believe you're going to present these, and then I am our illustrious judge group of one person.
Absolutely,
right?
of one person. And, we've taken a very robust democratic approach to finding our shortlist. We've searched far and wide. We've democratically asked everyone. By everyone, I mean my cat. And my cat is really the only person that matters here. So, yeah, my cat is a person. I will fight you if you disagree. So, anyway, we've got 3 in a shortlist for each category. And the first category, Zach, is most infamous card. As I've already said, there weren't as many here as we've had in previous sets, just because there wasn't really so much drama. But the first one, we've got Dark Amber Vault. with its nice 56% win record. And that is a card that says it's an artifact. It can come in any house, and it looks good in any house as well. And
It
it
does. It
says
does.
after you play a mutant creature, it's not like mutants matter in this set or anything. Draw a card. Each friendly mutant creature gets 2+ power. So it's a really cool card. It's a really, really cool card. So it's another artifact, as many of these seem to be, and it says play, name a card until Eaton's Jar leaves play. Cards with that name cannot be played. So it's a really good card for targeting different things that your opponent wants to do, really rewarding people for understanding, knowing the meta, knowing the game. And 3, the sins. We haven't mentioned them yet. I mean, really, I couldn't.
There was so much fun in this set. We can't get to it all in one episode.
Well, exactly, and that's why there was a whole year's worth of discovery in the set, right? It did a really good job with that. Zach, is there anything missing here? Is there anything infamous that you don't think I've covered?
I think this covers it pretty well. As far as the competitive end, I think some people might mention Cronus, but I'm not too worried. In the company of Dav, Eaton's Jar, and the Sins, I would say the Sins are very chase, and they're a lot of fun. And there are certainly, I think, some competitive Sins lists. But I think it's going to be between Eaton's Jar and Dark Amber Vault here. But the Sins were just such a cool idea, getting a minimum of 3, a maximum of 7, which there's such a small number of decks with all 7 Sins. They're just very cool designs. Very cool designs.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the term infamous might mean I'm chasing after this. So the 4 Knights and Sanctum, that's kind of that same vibe, isn't it? They weren't really making much of a difference, but they would chase. You wanted them. You wanted a copy of those cards. So what's your choice?
For most infamous card, I'm going to have to go with Dark Amber Vault, because Eaton's Jar it's straightforward. It's very good. It's a great thing to have in a deck where you're looking at deck lists, right? Making a strategic choice, all that sort of thing. Shout out to Helena, a deck owned by Zeramis over on the Nordic Keyforge podcast, which makes great use of Eaton's Jar. It's a brilliant card, but I think Dav is just oppressive. Dav, like Eaton's Jar, you know what it does. You go, dang it, okay, I can't play this card. Dav just Eaton's Jar makes you grunt. Dav makes you cry. Dav gives speed where there shouldn't be speed. Dav gives extra power, so you just have more removal options. Dark Amber Vault is just nasty. Dark Amber Vault is just nasty. When we tossed this out, Jake Friedman, formerly of Sanctimonious, now of Decision Space, said, "Talk me off the ledge about the design of Dav." I'm like, Jake, I don't know if I can, man. I don't know if I can. I think you're gonna just teeter off that despair ledge about Dav. Thank goodness it's like ultra rare. So, yes, I don't know if I'm ready to call it like a too strong design mistake. I don't think it's quite that bad, but I think it's absolutely nasty strong. Absolutely nasty. So that's my call, Dark Amber Vault. The thematic heart. The thematic heart of the set, and also one of its most oppressive mechanical pieces.
Awesome. So next category, Zach, we have got, drum roll please, best art.
My favorite podcast category.
See what he did there? Ha ha ha. So yeah, best art. We've got Hapless Cadet, the cat that's also a Star Alliance member. We've got the Monuments, which were a cycle of cards in Saurian.
That's right.
And we've got Reclaimed by Nature, which kind of looks like a monument in Untamed.
Right.
Just my love for landscapes on show there.
And
Um,
in fact, I suspect that's modeled after the Saurian monuments because it looks very Saurian. There's kind of a dinosaur chicken-esque leg coming out. I think that's a direct reference to the Saurian monuments there.
I think so too. I think so.
Yeah,
Honestly, it
yeah,
was quite hard choosing ones on here because the standard of art in this set just was really quite high. Or
yeah.
it had a kind of sheen of they knew exactly what they wanted in terms of art direction and they'd gone out to get it. Now, you could say that's an awesome thing. You could say that might stifle some sort of designs that would be really memorable, but yeah, it was just all of a really, really good quality. But what's
Of
your winner?
course. Oh my goodness, my winner.
And
Uh,
Zach, just think about the artists whose hearts you're going to be breaking by not going with their designs. You
well,
might need some letters of forgiveness.
uh, uh, there, there is Michel Georgi. I believe he may be. I don't. He may be French, but he is getting a lot of big. He doesn't need my validation. He's getting a lot of big Magic the Gathering work right now. Natalie Russo, who did the monuments, has had praise showered upon her before. And I think because of the art direction here and how they pulled it off, I'm going to have to go with Hapless Cadet, drawn, illustrated beautifully by Brandon Hunt. What I love about this is that there's very much a story and a moment being captured here in this brilliant purple, which just means it's going to maverick so well because it's this cat creature looking up with huge eyes. So they picked a creature that you can give these big expressive eyes to. It's a cadet who's picking up their pistol. Their whole other party is behind them in this cave, and this cadet is terrified by something out of frame. Like this card is saying there's something terrifying just out of here. And mechanically it's quite a fun card with 3 power, taunt, and then destroyed, your opponent loses 3. So a fun card, a useful card, and there's so much story going on that I just adore it. And so that is Hapless Cadet is my pick for best art.
Awesome. So we have 2 compasses given, 2 more to go. The next one is pushing design boundaries.
Hmm.
This is thinking about the cards that are maybe doing something that you can't do in other games. I mean, we've already kind of spoken about that. Or particularly for this set, maybe doing things that other sets haven't really been able to do before. So we've got Amphora Captura capturing the enhancement. We've got Eaton's Jar back again because of its interesting naming convention, giving the player the agency to kind of and the flexibility to do what they want to do with it. And then It's Coming, which is kind of essentially a tutor, if not a very, very focused one. And what I mean by a tutor for those kind of uninitiated with card games or newer to them, it's something that collects a certain card or type of card from your deck.
Yes. Oh, for pushing design boundaries, this one is pretty easy for me. It's pretty easy for me. I'm going to have to go with Amphora Captura because it is an enhancement focused card, giving a bunch of them and then giving you options based on enhancements and playing those enhancements. That's a pretty easy pick for me. I love that is just further exploring the space that Keyforge occupies with enhancements and doing something even more interesting and giving you choice with enhancements. So yeah, Amphora Captura all the way.
Awesome. Oh, so we've got 3 winners, 3 lucky winners, one
Mm-hmm.
one left, and this is possibly the most cool of discovery of the lot.
Ooh,
So
I'm excited.
yeah, so we have most flavorful cards, Zach. So
Ooh.
and oh my goodness, there are so many to choose from in this set. With all of those mutants from past sets, getting our lore nerdiness out. But so we've got Niffle Kong, who is the King Kong of the Niffle Apes. We've got a Rad Penny, and we've got a Subject Kirby. I do
Mm.
not envy your choice.
Ooh. Oh my gosh. So we have the King Kong card that goes and brings all of its apes with it, literally. We have Rad Penny, who is the evolved form of the fan favorite or fan least favorite Bad Penny, the infamous or the famous. And then who just keeps returning and stealing, or Subject Kirby, just the flipped version of Comm Officer Kirby. Oh man, most flavorful. Thinking about both the flavor, just like in the art, in the name, the stories they tell, and also the stories they're telling with their mechanics, right? I'm gonna have to go with Niffle Kong for most flavorful card. It summons a not insignificant portion of your deck onto the board. You then sacrifice Niffle traded creatures to deal damage, and blow stuff up, which I see as Niffle Kong just chucking other Niffles at things. And it is an event when you play Niffle Kong and you go search up 3, 4, Niffle Apes, Niffle Queens. It is an event when that's going well. So I'd have to go with Niffle Kong.
I think that's a good choice. That's a good choice. Although I'm not the one that's going to have to deal with Subject Kirby and Rad Penny coming after me.
Why do you think I picked Niffle Kong so that it didn't get angry at me?
This is a good point. It's a good point. If you're going to have
they're
one
combined 3 power, that's one Niffle's worth of damage.
Yeah, and you've got, what have you got on your side now? You have a vase on your side. You have
I've
you
got
have
an old vase and a hapless cadet.
and a dark amber vault. You can at least hide in that.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Good job you haven't annoyed 2 mutants that are going to be more powerful because because of where you're hiding.
Yeah, at least I'm crystallized, Zach, for this episode, so it'll be even footing there.
Oh yeah, you're a mutant too, of course. Anyway, talking through this, what do we think? I think in terms of it's all right looking at it now, and that's why we do this, right? We look at it a couple of years or 18 months after the sets come out, which gives us time to sort of look back with a degree of objectivity that we maybe do not have when everything is shiny, exciting, and new. But that does not mean, does it, Zach, that there isn't going to be more change over the past few years, that the set is going to be more kind of instilled in history of Keyforge history of doing one certain thing. So, certainly with this set, there is a low print run, and we may never see new decks printed from this set because Ghost Galaxy may not want to print more of this set. We don't even know if they can because of some of those challenges. So, first of all, Zach, how do you think this set is going to go down in the next couple of years as we get new sets releasing, and as much as you can know? And how do you think this set will play in Alliance?
I think this set is going to be a valuable and coveted one in the game's future. I think I would guess, this is all a guesstimate, right? I would guess that Ghost Galaxy won't go back to reprint older sets. I think they'll focus on the future sets, the natural excitement that's there. There's always going to be, I think, more demand for a brand new set than reprinting an old set, as much as, and some of us, we had like $1 Mass Mutation sales. People who wanted a crap ton of Mass Mutation, like me, have a crap ton of Mass Mutation. So I think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be reprinted, but that's just a guess. I think it will be coveted as far as competitive decks go, decks with really fun enhancements, decks with really fun gigantic setups like the Niffle Kong ones I mentioned, as well as things like the Sins. I have a number of Sins decks that are just so cool and fun. And I also think, due to enhancements with how they fall, it looks like Alliance Standard, is likely here to stay. We're still in the testing phase, of course, as of recording, but I think Alliance Standard is here to stay. And you could, there might be some infamous things you could pull off, just pulling together 3 different house pods that are all just loaded with enhancements, where the card that gave the enhancement isn't present. And so you don't have that drawback of that Infomorph or that Gloriana's Attendant. So I think this set is going to have a really powerful presence going forward on a fun and collectible level because of, gosh, we couldn't even get through all of the fun series and sets of creatures, and then the monuments and the sins and the gigantics, and we couldn't even get through all that. Like, we kept remembering more as this episode went on. And it's also a set with a lot of strong decks. So I think Mass Mutation is going to live large in the mind of many Archons for some time to come. I really look forward to the Worlds Collide versus Call of the Archons style counters in competitive play, let's say, as we dream towards the 2023 tournament scene from where we're sitting here at the mics, or at least I am. So I think it's going to have a lot of staying power. But what about you, Ed? From your perspective as a Keyforge player, what kind of value, what kind of future do you see Mass Mutation having for you? Because I know you're a little bit less sweaty than I am.
Yeah, I think for me it's going to be discovery and ongoing discovery. I think, we'll get to this in Dark Tidings, but I think Dark Tidings will probably have a bit less of a tail for me because it's very complex. There's a lot to think about, and I don't know. Mass Mutation kind of hits that sweet spot a lot more where there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's not so complex that it's not relaxing. So I think there's decks to rediscover in Mass Mutation. I think there's more things to discover, and I think other things are going to become more powerful. Maybe Eaton's Jar, for instance, might really come into its own with a particular meta in 5 years' time. So we just don't know, and that's quite exciting. Having said that, I think there's going to be a Europe and US divide here, because whilst you had access to pound or $1 decks of Mass Mutation, we've been paying a premium for quite some time. So I don't think you're going to be seeing many Mass Mutation decks in Europe, and I kind of hope that the kind of power creep of new sets does drown out a dominance of Mass Mutation to avoid there being a kind of a bias against people depending on where they live in the world. Essentially, is how it's come out. So I'm sure Ghost Galaxy Games will kind of stick the landing in terms of finding and striking a good balance. Obviously, it's impossible to strike perfection because it's Keyforge. There is a myriad of possibilities. It's the jungle. You can go so prepared, and then you can still get bitten by a spider or something. So you just don't know. You just don't know. But they're doing good. It's going to be good, and I'm excited to see how Mass Mutation gets on in the new world. Very, very excited. I'm just excited to play the set more, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had with Mass Mutation. I dig it. I really dig it. Well, I think that about does it for Mass Mutation. My gosh, I would not have thought it was over 2 years ago when this set came out, Ed. I guess we've had it for a long time. It really has been. I guess Mass Mutation has been a bit of my favorite, my Keyforge pandemic set, my little Keyforge security blanket through all the ups and downs of the last 2 years. So there's got a special spot in my heart, I think, for sure. And dear listener, thank you so much for joining us on Call of Discovery for this Setrospective. It was so nice to get back to this series. And gosh, the set's been out for 2 years now. I'm sure we'll wait a bit, get another set or two out, and then, of course, take a swing at Dark Tidings down the line, especially once that set has a chance to breathe in the tournament scene, maybe the local scene as that picks up. And so thank you so much for tuning in and giving us a listen here at Call of Discovery. If you are willing and able to support us monetarily, our Patreon is linked below, where you can join our Patreon-only Discord and get some hints about what our special guests are coming up. We've got at least one very special guest on the docket and some other plans brewing that our Discord is going to hear about first. So that's pretty cool. Let us know what you'd like to see more or less of in future shows. We're very active on Twitter currently, and you can always email us at podcast@callofdiscovery.com. Leaving a review is always helpful as people come and check out podcasts. Tell your friends about it if you're trying to get them into Keyforge. We've got a couple episodes you could send them. Try that out. And of course, make use of that new player guide on Archon Arcana. If you're a new player, go to the new player guide on Archon Arcana, the Keyforge wiki. If you're trying to make new players, well, save that link. Send it to a new player. But most importantly, thank you so much for listening. Tell a friend about Keyforge. Get them to listen to Call of Discovery. And then you'll have answered the Call of Discovery. And I won't have to ask you, have you answered the Call of Discovery?